We've got the minutes. I'd like to welcome everybody to our October 3rd Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. The first item on the agenda is the consideration of our September 8th minutes. Are there any changes that need to be done? If not, I will accept a motion.
I move we approve the minutes as presented.
I have a motion to approve as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, first item on the agenda is...
Commissioner President, before we get into the agenda items, if I may, can we add an old new business item to discuss a site plan for Starbucks project? Should be quick.
Okay. We'll put that on number 4.
The old new business, yes, sir.
Okay. So we will discuss after item D, we'll discuss Starbucks. Where is that located, Hunter?
Right on Greeno Road in front of Big Lots, that shopping center.
Okay, in the Big Lots Shopping Center at Greeno Road. If anybody's interested, we'll be discussing that after item D. All right, moving along, request of SE Civil for Magnolia Avenue site plan approval.
All right, good evening. Okay, you nailed it, SC Civil, and they are doing it on behalf of Magnolia Avenue LLC. SEC Civil's here so they can answer questions. The subject property is zoned B2, General Business District, and it is located in the Central Business District. And the subject property is approximately 0.47 acres and give or take 20,500 square feet. And it's just going to be one entity, so an MOP is not required. There's the site, aerials. That's what it looked like at the beginning of last week. They've since been demolished. And that is the rendering of what is to go there. There's a site plan. And you can kind of see where that, we'll talk about the parking spaces and stuff like that, but they're all in there. Okay, since it's in the CBD, the building can be built to the right of way, so there's no front setback and there's no side setbacks either. Parking spaces aren't required in the CBD, however, there are 8, including 2 handicap. All of them are going to be on the west side of the building and they'll be screened with some landscaping. There's also some on-street parking if necessary. And a traffic study wasn't warranted for this one. So there's an existing sidewalk. They want to expand it, enhance it to 8 feet, which is in compliance with the zoning ordinance. It is entirely with the right-of-way. So being in the right-of-way, the final construction details will be approved by the Public Works Director prior to construction. There are in the whole packet, there are some conflicts if it's going to be 7 inches thick or 4 inches thick, so we'll need some clarification on that. So the proposed building is 3 stories, total area of 24,123 square feet. Building heights, according to our zoning ordinance, should not exceed 40 feet, which is more or less 30 stories. I'm kind of late to the dance on this one, but you guys have been here when you've debated that back and forth, and there's been some variations throughout the years, but we have settled on 40 feet, all things considered. And right now there are no allowances for anything above 40 feet unless you start getting to the rooftop terraces, which is not part of this project. So we did receive, the original plans had the building is 44 feet tall, and it had some parapet walls that was covering up mechanical equipment. So it was kind of pushing it close to 50 feet. And then they submitted revised plans and it's still at 43.5. So we've got some illustrations of those as well. And just to note, staff can approve structures. We cannot approve structures over 40 feet, so.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
Can we?
I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
You can make recommendations for city council to consider modification to the zoning ordinance, but short of that, I don't see it falling into some sort of exception where you could provide some allowance beyond what's stated in the ordinance.
Because the ordinance stipulates 40 feet.
Correct.
Yeah,
All
that's
structures.
what I saw.
Yeah.
I was just confirming, do we even have the ability
Good
to
point.
approve that if we want to or not?
Right.
And I didn't think we did, but I wanted to confirm with Chris. Hunter and I were talking about that earlier, going over the deal, and I wasn't sure legally. I didn't think we did, and Hunter
Yeah.
didn't either, but since Chris is here, I'd, rather run it by him.
So this is the original north elevation. You can't really see right here, but you can see some of the stuff on the top looks like the HVAC units. There's those hollow boxes up there. Okay, good. They're see-through right now. And then this is the revised one, and they kind of have like an elevator penthouse, that brick square structure. But that still gets you at 43.5 feet.
So what is the building height on that? I mean, not counting the, can you go back one, please? So if you go right up to the top of the building, I'm adding, is that 13 plus 14 plus 13? or-
Yes.
So the building's exactly 40, and then the,
Did they just delete the parapet wall?
And the HVAC stuff went away. So I'm
Did it,
not sure where that went.
I guess that's a question for the developer, if it really did, or it.
okay.
And, if we had this conversation on the elevator shafts when we made the rooftop terrace, which we do allow it for 45 feet for a roof floor. Elevators and stairwells can't cover more than 7.5% of the roof. If that's
Wait a minute, get up there by the microphone.
He's got his mic.
That's right. And that, we had this debate whether that applies to everything or just those buildings with a rooftop terrace atop the third floor. So, and where we landed through all those conversations was only when the rooftop terrace is on top of the third floor is there that exception. And basically, that means the roof deck can't be at 40 feet if you do that. It's going to be at more like 32 feet. So, we have no allowance for this in our regulations right now.
There's an air conditioning deal that, elevator deal that can be done inside the building if need be.
Hydraulic.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Okay, no worries.
But that was a little
So there's 3D stuff. So you can see where the HVAC stuff was in the original one, and then it turned to the elevator. So still. There is a dumpster pad depicted in the plans. There's also an internal trash receptacle location, which they have on the east side of the building, and they feel confident that 3 of the largest city rollout cans will accommodate their trash needs. And then they have the option to contract with the city for multiple day pickups should they need it. Drainage plans were reviewed and approved by Richard Johnson, the Public Works Director, and Fairhope Public Utilities will be doing the utilities. A utility plan has been submitted. The applicant would like to have the power to be underground, but we'll get to the final stages of that concurrent with the building plan development. We'll be talking back and forth. And of course, ADA stuff will be on point. There's the landscape plan. And then landscape architect is coordinating with the city regarding the landscaping and tree removal. Like I said, the buildings have been demolished. The trees are still there until they figure that out. And the landscape plans do have the existing sidewalk. And again, we'll just need to figure out what that sidewalk's going to be, 4 or 7 inches thick, and have that sidewalk in all the visuals. We believe that the proposed office will ultimately be an asset, the central business district, and it does accommodate the requirements and goals of the zoning ordinance as well as the comprehensive plan, except for the rub with the building height. So that's where we're at.
Any more questions for staff at this time?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a separate from the height. The way the dimension standards read in the CBD was non-residential buildings in the CBD shall be built at the right-of-way line unless the courtyard plaza or other public open space is proposed. So we've always interpreted that as public open space. This may, and I can't think of even in areas where it's sort of privatized open space with tables and chairs for restaurants, for example, there's not typically large courtyard walls. So that I love that this building has indoor-outdoor spaces and the balconies and all that, but I my interpretation of that CBD dimensional standards was that you're not allowed to have
Until it's public.
private open space. It's,
Where I would kind of argue that point, we certainly allow outdoor seating for restaurants. They
Yeah.
have to be excluded and not public for ABC rules and things like that, so.
they're just not behind a big wall.
Yeah, well,
If in the,
that's certainly debatable on what the wall looks like, but I think we have allowed private open space. at front of
that's
the
true. I mean, that's what I was trying to say. I mean, there are restaurants, they're using that for a table. I guess, does it meet the spirit of that if you can still circulate through there? I can walk my dog through there. It feels like part of the streetscape. The public isn't excluded by, a really significant wall there. So,
Noted.
wanted to make sure we hash through that.
Okay, yeah, that's, I think, a good point for later in the meeting when we get to the motion time.
Okay, a couple of things. Back to the sidewalks. There's a conflict between the ordinance at 7 inches and what's proposed at 4 inches?
No,
Thick-
the
and
drawings
thickness?
just differ.
I'm sorry? Okay, all right.
construction.
All right,
And what we will
I'll
say-
leave that one alone, but ordinance requires, go back to what Lee was talking about, ordinance requires 40 feet, right? So if we don't like the 40 feet and you think we're gonna start allowing for exceptions, then it never stops. Because then it's 50, then if you allow 40 feet, 44 feet, and the next one's gonna be 50 feet, and
Yeah.
there's gonna be no excuse
Right.
to prevent somebody from going to 50 feet
And
if
you-
you've already violated what the ordinance says. If you don't like the ordinance, we change the ordinance, right? Okay, that's
Yeah.
that one.
And Art, if I could add something to what you're saying, we changed it to 40
Right.
because architects were giving us a lot of pressure to change it to 40 so they could give us more dimensional options.
Right.
And so we said 3 stories and 40 feet so that we could give them some architectural creativity.
Not
And since
flat
we've
roofs.
done that, those same architects have come back with 4 straight buildings that have been 40 feet tall with flat roofs.
Yeah.
To the inch.
Yep.
And I question, do you need an architect to go 40 feet, property line to property line to property line? I mean, I can draw a square box, and I'm not an architect. And somebody have to come in and design the inside for me, and I need to get an engineer to engineer it for me, but I can draw a square with the ruler pretty
In
good.
defense of architects, I bet the building owners are asking them to do that.
I don't know.
And I'm all about eliminating, I mean, the worst thing you can
No
have.
names mentioned.
My- Worst thing you can have, in my opinion, is an office building with 8-foot ceilings. They're horrible. I mean, they just are. But at the same time, if you don't like the ordinance, change the ordinance. But the thought of allowing something in excess just isn't it. All right, so that was that one. Then does our ordinance not stipulate that our parking will be in the rear of the buildings?
It does, or screened, and they have provided the screens.
Get back up on the microphone there.
Or screened, and they have provided the screen.
Or screen. Okay, it didn't say, I don't remember it saying that. in there.
And kind of what we looked at there is clarifications
Yeah.
on being located, on the corner.
Yeah, it's adjacent to
regions
the
here,
sidewalks, and there's already a driveway and stuff.
It looks like the original was screened, but not the revised.
I didn't see that, and it didn't say it in the workup. And if it is that it can be one or the other as long as it's screened, then it certainly needs to stipulate that.
You go back to the landscape. There are
Yeah.
edges right there.
And Hunter and I looked it up, one of them's really tall.
Yeah.
I
And they're
think it-
taller shrubs too, not.
I
do
think
like-
they may have been excluded from the rendering just so we can see more of the building, and that may be a question for the developer. I think that they're in the landscape plan, but not in the rendering.
I do like the way that they're not sacrificing a lot of parking spaces out on the
Right.
public parking spaces. I was talking to Hunter about a pet peeve of mine now is how so many buildings, we're giving like 4 or 5 public parking spaces so they can open their gate to get into their private parking. And, I just wonder, how fair that is for the citizens in Fairhope.
Especially on this street, if we've
Yeah,
seen
it's busy.
before. So there's there's some merit, the having the parking there, and on-site, adding some parking there is, when you don't have to, is, I think, a benefit. And maybe we need to talk about that courtyard thing, that's, didn't even come up, because if you can have a 40-foot wall, what's the difference in an 8-foot, screen to that? And you're blocking something in, so that's kind of the way we looked at it. It did step back. We've talked about the buildings not fronting completely and having some different architecture. So we kind of maybe we're blindsided by, hey, this is actually accommodating a lot of those things we've been asking for.
Well, I think it's a good project generally. I just don't see public courtyard when I look at that. And it may be something that could be solved by the height of that fence.
Well, let's ask the engineer when he's here, and then you can put that in the motion, depending on how you feel after we hear the explanation. I think it's a very good point. All right, any other questions for staff? Larry, do you have anything to add at this time?
I'm going to start with the easy ones first. Larry Smith, SE Civil, for the developer. The question on the sidewalk thickness is that note's actually just calling out where that driveway crosses the sidewalk for that section to be 7 inches thick, so we don't end up with your typical 4-inch section of sidewalk that gets crushed by any vehicles driving down that driveway. So we're referring them to the, if you read the note, well, it's cut off, but the note over there is referring him to the concrete paving detail for that section of sidewalk. Then the rest of it is the standard 4-inch sidewalk. So that was the easy one. We're just, we know vehicles are going to be driving across it, and over time, a 4-inch thick section of concrete is going to get crushed. So we just wanted to make sure that a contractor poured that section thicker. So that was the easy one. Obviously, the staff recommendation is for it to meet the 40-foot height. We were working with the architect to get it down, and they still have some height issues to resolve, and so we would go with what the staff recommendation is on that overall height. Yes, those HVA units did not go away, so they've got to accommodate those and screen those.
Well, as you heard from our attorney, without the city council changing that ordinance, which they probably wouldn't, and I would suggest they not, we don't, it's not like we have the choice to say, oh, sure, it looks great.
Yeah, I understand that. So we'll go with the staff recommendations on that. And I believe this is, a recommendation for the city council. If for some odd reason they do see fit, then we'll have to drop back and visit y'all again. But I agree. I don't think that's something they're looking to change, because every time you get an inch, take an inch. So I've been before y'all plenty of times, and I've seen it go up and down depending on what's happened when the ordinance got changed. So as far as the wall, actually I'll start with the screening, because that's just another easy one. Yeah, the screening, the landscape plan is the accurate. This is just a rendering that someone put together, and I think that they took some of the vegetation out of there, and half the time they don't even use the correct vegetation. They're just dropping plants on these renderings. But the landscape plan is accurate. They are screening it with some taller shrubs to screen the view of the parking. As far as the, what's that?
I don't mean to interrupt. There would be a tree, like right in front of that car, there's actually a tree on the landscape plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And the landscape plan is accurate.
Is the wall accurate on the courtyard?
I believe the height is accurate on the courtyard. Unfortunately, I really can't speak to it, because I would need the architect to. I mean, if that's something that is going to be part of the motion for it to reduce, I just ask for a height limit.
I agree, with Rebecca totally, that whether the side is screened to, protect where you don't see the cars, I think that's fine. But the front, I don't think should be screened. It's, claustrophobic on the city street, number one, and number two, I think you're selling, not that I'm an architect, obviously, but I think they're selling themselves short. I think in Mardi Gras and places like that, you wouldn't want to have a 8-foot wall sitting out there.
They will need some form of wall because of the height it's over 30 inches grade, so they'll need something. So that's what I was just saying.
Yeah, but I'm saying like a 4-foot wall where people can kind
So
of,
guardrail height,
Yeah.
sorry, it could go back to, it's a solid guardrail instead of a open guardrail.
The only other thing I can think of is on the inside, there is a fountain on that wall above
That's-
the two
Yeah.
gentlemen's head.
That's what I was gonna ask, if that was a pool or what, because if it's a certain depth, don't you have to have it completely?
It's 18-inch max depth, so that was a question that they
It looks
asked.
like a pool, and I thought, oh,
But then, I mean, pool fence requirements still
4
are.
foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
It's close to
it's just a
guardrail height.
fountain. I was just gonna say,
I doubt
if
it's-
there's a feature on that wall that's pouring into that fountain, just on that one panel,
Oh.
it comes up to that panel right there. I'll see, if you can see
Well,
my
that would
cursor.
be
And
right
to
in front of the
echo Lee,
cars.
I'm less concerned about
The
the
side.
side.
side doesn't
It's the
matter.
But,
front.
I mean, with their look,
Yeah.
I doubt they'd want to jog up and down, you know.
Yeah.
But if they were jogging up for a fountain, to me, that's not an issue. It's more if the whole thing is behind an 8-foot wall that no longer feels like a public, even a semblance of a public space. And you can't catch any beats.
Is that, yeah, is that accurate, the retaining wall behind the shrubs? Is that 3 feet, 4 feet before you start?
I have no clue.
Yeah,
on
if
what
you,
that- how
I mean,
that-
if you have enough, if you're stepping back 3 feet, you don't actually have to have a guardrail. If you have 3 feet of land
Oh, no,
that is
it's-
not
no,
30
they'll-
inches down.
It's 30 inches at the wall.
Okay,
'Cause,
okay, okay.
yeah, basically, the sidewalk goes to the wall, and so it is a straight drop there. If you drive down
Okay.
there right now, you notice
It's-
yeah, and so basically, the sidewalk will clip that hill to create, basically to the right-of-way line to get the 8-foot sidewalk in there, and then it will go vertical with the retaining wall.
So is that shrub there? Is that in the length? I would,
Yeah,
so there's a, okay.
but
So,
there's not a vertical, there's not a level, and then it drops. It will,
so the shrub is at the sidewalk height,
Mhm.
and there's a retaining wall behind it?
yeah.
Yeah. So, if you did that wall, and this will be, I hope, a part of the motion, but if you did that wall facing north at 4 feet, the people inside would be looking at 8 feet, so they'd be looking over the roof of, just even vans and SUVs, and kind of keep them from being claustrophobic. I think it'd be a win-win on both sides,
Right.
especially with Mardi Gras and things like that, having it open where you can, see the floats go by and everything.
Or do you do, it's not a, it's a more architect question, mimic some of the same, the balcony has the glass walls, that would really be, they open up the courtyard. You need to-
What we're saying, Larry, is you did a great job with everything
Dude, my
you did.
8 parking spots
With
were
what
awesome.
You did awesome.
Thank
The
you.
ingress, egress, and the elevations are perfect.
Yeah.
They should have said
I
the
nailed the
architect-
ADA component. Thank
ADA,
you.
the elevations, everything's great. We need the architect here.
I always laugh when I get these downtown MOP projects, and I'm like, are you going building property line to property line? Okay, I'll submit it for you. So at least I had a couple of parking spaces.
You
so.
did a good job.
Gotcha.
Did I answer all the questions out there?
I'll
So-
add a little bit on the sidewalk, and kind of way we, just to tip Larry off why we added that, the public works, you all know, a lot of the sidewalks are pavers, and a lot of times we'll provide those.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that it might not even be paving as shown.
Yeah.
Probably even the image here shows the pavers, so
Yeah.
hopefully we can get to that, so it's consistent. And then if they need to pave where the people are driving. I think that's what-
Okay. All right, well, thank y'all. See you soon.
All right. This is a public hearing. Oh, it's not a public hearing, never mind. Site plan review is not a public hearing, but if anybody from the public has any comments, would you wish to add any? Yes, sir.
Gary Gover, 300 Lincoln Street in Fairhope. 5 or 10 years ago, there was an idea to increase the access to the parking garage. And it was going to put, it proposed to put an entry-exit from Magnolia Street across this property into the parking garage. It would be easily done, modifying the existing structures of the garage. So I'm wondering if that had been given any thought.
I don't think so, because, the parking garage has just had an entire reboot done to it, and I think, and Hunter might, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think they're just waiting for AlDOT to approve the grant that came through.
I believe we are a few weeks away from that coming, so I think that's the Arts Alley project.
Right, the Arts Alley, where they're kind of, gussying up the entrance on both sides and redoing, putting a little bathroom in there and a Bratz bus pickup and ingress off of the church and egress off of Section Street, and then adding kind of more parking and shielding the garbage cans. It's a really neat project, a nice piece of public art at the entrance of it. So, and that did not come up in it, so I don't think that would be anything for years and years to look at. And regardless, this is private property that, would have to be purchased by the city.
So
anyway.
we did discuss this. I mean, everything was kind of discussed early on, including if they could line up the third floor with there's a landing at the stairs with the third floor of the parking deck. You can see some kind of open space in the little area there. It's not included right now. Like I said, this is a private project, so I think there was as much accommodations to look at that for the future could be, but with the Arts Alley project that's been going on longer than I've been here, and we're finally getting across the line with that phase, I don't think we're holding this, really wanted to hold up to try to get an answer for that. But there is some accommodations there, should there be. Y'all might have had more conversations internally.
It's not for vehicular access, but, obviously down here in this corner, we went straight to the property line with the sidewalk. And if we can get pedestrian connectivity to it, again, we didn't want to interfere with grants and everything that were going on, but we went ahead and took our sidewalk to the property line versus squaring it up with the parking right there, with the hopes that we can work with the city to at least get a pedestrian connectivity back to that parking garage.
Cool.
All right. Commissioners, any more questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion. And by the way, just for those of you in the public, in this case, we will make a recommendation to City Council that will ultimately make the final decision. So I'm looking for a recommendation motion.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I move that on SR 2207, we recommend approval to City Council with the following conditions: that it remains in compliance with the height restrictions of 40 feet for all structures, and that the courtyard enclosure not exceed what is required for a guardrail by code.
Is that 42 inches?
But on the
Yeah.
north side or all the way around?
I guess on the north side is my biggest concern. On the north side, I can't imagine them wanting to.
Okay. So I have a motion to recommend approval, subject to meeting the height ordinance and not having the wall higher than the
It's less than
42 inches.
than 42 inches on the north side of the building. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, public hearing to request public hearing from Stephen Roberts and Jason Long, requesting a B2 zoning for land located on 8051 County Road 34.
The applicants Jason Long and Stephen Roberts, acting on behalf of the owner June Long, are requesting to establish an initial zoning of B2 General Business District concurrent with conditional annexation into the city of Fairhope. The property is approximately 1.70 acres and is located at the northeast corner of Old Battles Road and US Highway 98. Here's some contextual maps where you can see that it is surrounded by county outside, or property outside of the city, and that there's a single-family residential structure on site. It is currently zoned CP, Community Preservation District by Baldwin County, and it lies in District 8. And it's important to note that this is a straight rezoning request and does not include a site plan for intended uses. Future uses, if approved, shall meet the Fairhope zoning ordinance requirements. The subject property is located across the street from the Publix development, which is pending annexation into the city. Annexation of the subject property is contingent upon being contiguous to city property, but specifically, they noted the Publix property. The zoning ordinance defines B2 General Business District as follows. It is intended to provide opportunity for activities causing noise and heavy traffic not considered compatible in the more restrictive business district. These uses also serve as a regional as well as a local market and require location and proximity to major transportation routes. Recreational vehicle parks, very light production, and processing activities are included. And we included the use table in your packets as well. So staff recommends case ZC 22.12 PPIN 26270 be approved with initial zoning of B2 General Business District with conditional annexation with the following condition, that the subject property shall be contiguous to the city of Fairhope corporate limits. The applicant and her agents are present as well to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Casey at this time? Thank you, ma'am. Would anybody like to speak on behalf of the developer, or would you like me to open the public hearing first?
Hey there, I'm Stephen Roberts. I appreciate y'all's consideration. I'm here on behalf of Ms. Long, the owner of the property. We believe it's in line with the comprehensive plan to strengthen the Green Oak Road Convenience Corridor. And, but we definitely appreciate y'all's consideration. I wanted to see if y'all had any questions for me at this time.
Any questions? All right, thank you. All right, again, we will just make a zoning change is actually an ordinance. An ordinance is currently be done by city council. So again, on this, we'll just make a recommendation to city council. This I know is a public hearing. Would anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? In that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, commissioners.
Motion, Mr. Chairman. Case ZC 22.12, conditional annexation to B2. I move that we make a recommendation to the city council subject to, for approval, subject to council's approval of annexation of the public sites across the street so that there will be contiguous corporate city limits with this property.
Or any property that may make it contiguous.
Okay, I've got a.
Or any property that may make it contiguous.
What?
Any property that may make it contiguous.
It's just as long as it's
Any
contiguous.
property instead of just the public's property.
Well, okay, yeah, any property.
Okay, so.
What is the, speaking of that, well, let me ask, when's the city council here to one for the public?
So, and let me, and I want to tell the applicant this as well. So there's a, I believe in October 24th will be the public hearing for the property north of Publix to annex into the city. And that will be heard 2 council meetings, and then Publix will be on the following in November. That will be 2 meetings. Until that happens, this one cannot be in front of the city council.
Okay, so, but
Probably going to be December,
January.
or maybe even January before the final annexation.
okay.
All right, so I've got a motion to recommend to city council to rezone to B2, subject to the property being contiguous with the city limits.
Can we just, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman, can we confirm that that is indeed Art's motion in light of, is that your motion? Do you agree with that?
Yep.
Okay.
So do.
That is your motion?
Aye.
You amend to,
Yeah, I thought he had changed it that way. So we have a motion, once again, just so Chris will pay attention this time. That we have a motion to recommend to City Council to rezone to B2, subject to the property being contiguous to the City Fairhope city limits, correct, Art?
As if, you got it.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, ZC 2214, Fly Creek PUD amendment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Fly Creek PUD was began years ago. This is the property where the north, I think Publix is in the middle of a lot of our projects, but this is the one that's been there for a while off Parker Road. That was the original PUD and the commercial component. In 2006, PUD came around to amend that, and we're seeing a relatively minor change to the PUD proposed. The PUD on the left is shown in that light pale blue. That's the overall Fly Creek PUD. The property affected by this amendment is shown on the right. If you recall, in 2019, there was a MOP come along that created the basically condoed lots for townhomes. 5 of those were built. What we're looking at here, and I'm gonna back up just because this is the quickest summary. So there's 3 components to this potential request. It's modifying, the townhomes had live-work component, and it was a little bit unclear what was required. That definition is a little unclear, and the request is to modify those to just townhomes. Then there was some prompted some reconfiguration of the roads with the architectural changes being proposed. So we'll kind of go into those details to show that here, but just for reference, this was a 2006 amendment that had 240 apartments that are already built there, and then the 90 townhome and live-work units. In 2019, the site plan on the screen was approved. If you notice, just for reference, this piece here was left out of the 2019 amendment. So there was, I believe, 77 townhomes shown on this plan. And then this is the current proposed plan, and just kind of showing you the details of what's changing. There is a new private road added here. There's a slight realignment of the road in yellow. And then this is the 2006 included the live-work units, and this is being requested as just residential townhomes. So looking at those 3 options in the analysis we performed here, this is the site of the live-work units. There is, and I'll just jump right out and say this was proposed, and you see the response down from the applicant to respond to the current residential market. It was a little tough to sell this. And like I said, live-work is a hard to define. We don't have a definition in our ordinance. That can be as simple as a home occupation, which we allow. So that can be live-work. It could be if it was just townhomes. So in general, we do not see any conflict with the comp plan or the PUD is approved. I do, and I'm a planner, so I'm gonna, just say I think there's a missed opportunity. You see the office components here have had trouble leasing out. You've got residential and standard commercial, vehicle-oriented commercial. I think the only thing missing, and this was one of the village nodes, one of the early uses of that, I think there is one component missing here. Is that's kind of that gathering spot, that great third place, whatever you want to call it. It's planning concepts in general. And just throwing some, kind of inspiration there. There's those outdoor places where the residences and the people within the offices and outside folks can kind of gather and interact. I would hope we could get some consideration for that, but there's no conflict in the request and the PUDs that are approved. So, and I would, as your planning director, I would be willing to make allowances to make this happen. If that was even increasing a height limit to get more units or something along those lines, I would be willing to support that. Of course, that has to go through Planning Commission and certainly the City Council. But, I couldn't not present that. The reconfiguration of the road, I mean, we've got some really tight, buildings right up at the road I'm not sure about. But I will say there is a site plan and follow-up MOP. So we didn't nitpick the plan. It's conceptually, are we okay with this and these changes? And then we'll look at those details in the follow-up reviews. That one of those, Cordy Ridge Road is now a city road. There's the image of it, the way it looks today. There were plans for where those islands would be, and personally, I don't want to cut those down anymore in a road. And now with a new road internally, there's an opportunity for those people to come down to the next entrance if they need to go back north. So, personally, don't see if we need to really cut that island back just for that entrance. The architectural plans, I give Stuart and Jason a lot of credit, and Dewberry's here to represent them. We've debated kind of these plans and details for a couple of years now, and they've put a lot of work into coming up with plans that work for them and meet, I think, the intent of the PUD and what was originally approved. So within there's in essence 5, 6 layouts. I think there was a duplicate of the kind of 2-unit townhomes, the duplex. There was 2 of those. Technically, I guess there would be 6 plans. We saw this is actually, it was labeled the front on these, but I think it's the rear elevations. You see the garages.
Well, I think they're the front if they now have that new frontage road and then they're backing up to the Cordy. That's one of my questions.
They're actually.
There's 2 sides.
So rear-loaded townhome is a requirement. So the rear where the garage is actually the rear. The frontage is going to, in different areas, front different directions, but certainly Cordy Ridge Road will have frontages on both sides.
The ones that are out there now have garages on them.
That was because the courtyard hasn't been developed on the other side.
And going back to that, so, and I will mention, good point. Here's the frontage, here's the 5 units that are built. So in townhomes, they're supposed to be rear loaded. So technically the front's a green on these. And that the elevations reflect that on the previous architectural plans. I think it was just a mislabeling because I believe you're going to see another presentation that Dewberry is performing. It's provided those elevations for clarification and gave us some front elevations as well.
So what, okay, I won't go down a rabbit hole, but I'm just, if the front's a green, who's really coming to your front door along that? I mean,
neighbors.
I mean,
yeah.
I would, it just seems like a workaround a little bit. But I'd rather it front of green than have a road on both sides, so
right.
That seems.
And I think the important one here is on the public road and that frontage,
Yeah, they're not garages on the public road.
Right. I'm a little less concerned when everything's internal and private than if it's fronting that gets a little bit, front and rear get a little blurry. But I think the frontage of the road here and how we address a public street is certainly important.
Well, I think we were trying to protect the green where you didn't have cars and extra roads and, have kind of usable corridors.
Yeah.
I think what the intent was when we were discussing that.
Yeah. And that within the PD allows that without the strictest interpretation of our townhome guidance.
Okay.
These are just some examples. Your packets, you have, I believe, everything except for the 3-unit was shown to see that architectural details. Again, the undulations and not just a big flat facade was a lot of effort put in that. This was the level of detail we received in 2019, and do want in the follow-up with a site planner MOP would like to see this level of detail for those units. But again, that's got a cost to it. So, I understand the applicants give some examples here, and if we can get through this approval, then then follow up with those technical details. So with that said, we do recommend approval of case CZ 22.14 with 3 conditions. The building shall fall within established setbacks and allow room for required landscape buffers. I need to back up real quick to show you one thing on this plan. And this area here, this is residential property, not part of this PUD. So the buffer here, I do have some questions. There's a fence, but it's not called out in the detail. There's a single row of hedges that are smaller. I do think that needs to be a more substantial buffer against that large lots on that side. We can look for some guidance, and we can certainly look at that within this MOP and site plan review. There's room enough to do it, so it doesn't change the layout at all. So that explains that condition, and then a formal site plan multiplexing project shall be conducted, and then detailed floor plans shall be provided for each of the building types with front rear elevations with particular focus on the front of the buildings along Cordy Ridge Road. Do I have any questions? Do you have
Any questions for Hunter at this time? All right, thank you, Hunter. Stuart, y'all have a presentation at this time, or would you like me to call the public hearing first? Up to you.
We've got it up if you want to go through
All
it.
right.
Either way.
We'll just try to address, I'm Kathy Barnett with Dewberry. We'll go
Okay.
ahead and run through the presentation, and then if we have additional questions from the public, we'll
Sure.
come back and answer those
Perfect.
as much as possible. We did want to, thank you, Hunter, for presenting this. We just wanted to kind of try to address some of the questions that came up at the site preview, and then anticipate questions that you might have, as well as answer some of the others. So this is kind of the architectural sketch and rendering of the site plan. As stated, there are 3 minor amendments. The addition of the road, it's 2,500 plus or minus linear feet of cider mill, a reorientation. We've shrunk some of the footprint, and I'll give you some more details about what we've done for the site plan to address it, and then we have changed some of the architectural renderings. So they are confusing because we did just use the same elevations. You saw some of the other renderings and elevations. We will get happily more detailed plans presented to you during the MOP process and understand that that's a requirement. But this is the front elevation. This is the rear elevation on Cordy Ridge. It is confusing because they're basically 2 fronts. So, and I ended up using, for some reason, all of the ones with the blue coloring, but you did see that there are some grays and some other colors, so it's not going to be just stark blue. Cider Mill Lane, another of the duplex options, and the rear elevation of Cider Mill Lane. And you can tell the slight difference because it's not a garage door. Speaking to the use conversion and why we're looking for that live work, this is a map we received from the folks that lease the space at Fairhope Village shops, and it's never fully been occupied. It's never reached 100% occupancy, and so here we are 15 years down the road. There's a huge live work space in the OP3 building that's still, out parcel still with OP3, and so we're looking, it just hasn't hit that market yet, and so the townhomes are more palatable for this area. We're breaking down the units. There's no change in total units, so we were at 90 before. We remain at 90. We've actually decreased the number of bedrooms to 248 from 253, so a little bit less dense. The entire site, and obviously with the MOP submission, this will be further scrutinized, but we just wanted to kind of hit some high notes. The master drainage plan, there were some questions about whether or not it adjoined the floodway. It adjoins it, it doesn't touch it. The no-rise study showed that there'd be no increase in the floodway, and our engineer of record, Andy Bobie, who did the original engineering and design, the total runoff is less than the current PUD, and I've got those calculations generally for you today, and then you can scrutinize them at the MOP process. So to be more specific, that addition of the 2,510 linear feet, along with the decrease footprint of units, has a lower peak discharge than the 2019 amendment. So it's not a huge number, but it is less. And obviously, we're always concerned about stormwater, so we just wanted to highlight that for you. The sewer, there are
Another question was asked, what are the plans for the remaining parcels or parcels within the PUD? At this time, Mr. Cordy does not have any development plans for the remaining parcels of the PUD. The sewer capacity of the lift station was designed and accounted for with the FEMA grant that was done, and the initial development costs were done at the original development. Speaking about the amenities, you brought up the gathering spot. The idea for that was a pool and an open air pavilion, which kind of creates that gathering spot. We can flesh that out and hopefully build something more. But there is a lot of green space and walking connectivity throughout the development. That the idea is that it's not people just in their little units, that there's a sense of community within the development. So I think we understand, obviously, that the level of detail in the MOP will be further scrutinized. We just wanted to kind of hit the high notes about the plans. So if there are other questions, or if you want to open the public hearing.
Any questions for the developer this time? All right, thank you. Like I said, this is a public hearing. Anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am. If you'll state your name and your address for the record,
I'm
please.
Cindy Powell. I'm one of the private homeowners that has the property adjacent to where these townhomes are going to come in. And my neighbor who couldn't be here, she and I spoke about it. We're concerned about the buffer on the back side, and I think you mentioned this, to make sure that we have enough buffer space between our property line and the back of those townhouses, since that's where they're going to be putting a road in. So if that could be taken into consideration, we certainly would appreciate it.
That is, and it's interesting you said that when Hunter was. What was your address? And if you'll put your address down, please. As part of the staff's recommendation, the buffers will be looked at and complied with, and we have one more round after this, the multiple occupancy MOP, and at that point we look more in the details of the setbacks of the buildings and the buffers and how they're doing the buffer, whether it's plants or fences and things like that. So you'll want to come to that meeting in the future. She would get a notice for that, wouldn't she? You'll get a notice for that. Make sure you come to that meeting, because that's the meeting we'll discuss more of those kinds of details in. Anybody else from the public wish to speak to this item? All right, commissioners, I'll close the public hearing at this time.
Mr. Chairman, I move we recommend to the City Council approval of ZC 22.14 Fire Creek PUD amendment with staff recommendations.
I've got a motion to recommend approval subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Stuart, I'll just say I agree a lot with what Hunter said. I think your plan is fine and it meets, the PUD's intent totally, but I think if you put something to bridge that, it might even help the rentals on that back side, because I've always wondered why those don't rent real well. I don't know what your rent structure is, but I get people asking me for office space, twice a week in, the downtown Fairhope, and you're not that far from it. But, bridging that maybe to where it doesn't look backwards and kind of tie all that together with kind of a outdoor restaurant place, I think would be really cool there. Of course, it's not my money. I like to tell other people what to do with theirs, but I really think it could be, thinking of Brevard, North Carolina, and some of those places where you have a lot of those outdoor places where, the garage doors almost open up on the side of the building to make just a entire outdoor place, but they can be closed when the weather changes. Might be something you just think about.
I'm going to third that. Sorry, I'm going to second and third that, or chime in that I think there was a missed opportunity when we call something a village, and then it really is traditional retail, big box, big parking lot, and then segregated residential, and that with that out parcel that's adjacent to the Sioux Story places, that would be it's a little less. There's a little less parking lot overwhelming the retail, and if there was something with some life to it, coffee shop, restaurant, in that out parcel, it might help everything. And I hate to see, it would be wonderful to have something in the residential area too, to break it up. Live, work may be hard to understand, but mixed use isn't. And I feel like mixed use is that's what makes a village, and that's not here. So.
And our live, work's not real well defined. And you've obviously done a good job on the apartment complex, because we're not meeting next door and there aren't 6 news vans outside, and I don't see anybody with ropes and nooses ready to try to hang us when we walk out of the meeting, which is always pleasant.
No, I mean, I'm happy to speak to the mixed use part of it, if I can, for just a second.
Sure.
You know, the overall PUD, I mean, one thought is that the overall PUD is a mixed-use development, right? You've got the commercial out front and then residential less,
I guess I
less
meant
intense,
mixed-use
and then-
buildings.
Yeah,
like, you know,
yeah,
that's
right,
a different
understand.
flavor.
But I guess our challenge is that Fly Creek Avenue, the shop space has still got significant vacancy there, never been fully leased, out parcel never sold. And then you get further down toward our end, and by the way, the live work piece was just a small component of the overall development plan there. But you're looking at you've got the Publix kind of, truck court area back there too. It's just not a great area. And when you're doing live works, which is, as we kind of had originally envisioned, you've got an office or maybe shop space downstairs, residential above, and you're trying to sell that, that combo to an end user, and it's just it's a small market, we think, and we just think, but we think residential is very viable there, and so we think the odds of success and actually working out go up if you don't overcomplicate it. So that was all, but it's a small piece of the 90, it's 90 townhomes, and this would be, 8 or 10 of those in that area.
Well, I know that's what you're comfortable with and what you do, and you do a great job at it, but that's what we were just trying to think of as kind of a way to bridge those two sides together, because it's almost like that.
Yeah.
Cordy Ridge almost makes like a division, and I know a lot of it is kind of the topography that you have there, it's just so steep. But it really would be cool if there was something that could kind of bridge those together.
I hear you, and we've wrestled with it, and we're just trying to live work.
Yeah.
No.
I think a mixed-use building could.
Yeah. I agree.
Yes.
But again, that's a different.
That's really different.
The opportunity's there, you gotta know how to do it, so.
Yeah, if you got that right anchor, restaurant, Baumhauer's type of a, place or what have you, it could really be cool there. I'd be there. Anyway, thank you, though. Great plan. Thank you. All right, last item on our agenda, SD 20.
We never voted.
Oh, excuse me.
Get a motion in a second.
Oh, well, we'll see you next month. I've got a motion in a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Glad we got that vote in there for you, Stuart. Final item on the agenda, ST 22.28, Overland Phase 1 final plat approval.
So this is the final plat approval. We have SE Civil, Larry Smith with us tonight on behalf of the owner, 68V Overland 2021. It's a 34-lot major subdivision. It's approximately 15.8 acres and is located on the south side of County Road 48 east of River Mill Drive, so just to the east side of Walmart as well. Property is zoned a planned unit development with an approved site plan. On the screen, the left, you can see the zoning map, and on the right, the aerial. The copy of the plat is on the screen here. The site data table reflects all the requirements of the PUD, the setbacks. A few comments: all the street trees and sidewalks have been installed. That watering and maintenance of the trees and maintenance of the sidewalks will be the responsibility of the subdivider during the 2-year bonding period. Engineers provided his certificate for design and construction for all the improvements in the subdivision. The current walking trails are mulch paths with a metal edging, and the POA or HOA will be responsible for that routine maintenance and repair and keeping them in good working order.
But they're not all installed. There's just that little stretch. There's the cool one is not installed.
The large one is not installed, and we'll look at that in the slide coming up.
Okay.
The phase line for phase 1 has changed slightly from the preliminary approval, and again, I'll go a little bit further into that on next slide or two. In brief, initially, there was a 3-lot minor subdivision to create the area for the 3 different developments for the Overland townhomes,
Overland Phase 1 and Overland Phase 2. That plat was not recorded, so this final plat will create Lot 1, where Overland Townhomes are currently under construction. Lot 2 will be for the Phase 2, which has not been developed, and then lots 3 through 34 are actually the 32 single-family residential housing that is in Overland Phase 1. Real quick, the entrance sign and entrance landscaping has not been installed. There has been a permit done. There will be a need for a separate sign permit to be reviewed. Currently, that permit is listed on the screen. The scope of work listed below. That's for the monument sign. Majority of the work has been done. The walking trail running north and south. They still need to put the CB units in. So kind of the additional comments. So there's a proposed walking path linking Phase 1 and Phase 2 together that went through the wetlands that was not installed. The PUD shows a trail beginning in Phase 1, then with a bridge and ending with a circular path in Phase 2. I have a note in red on here that during the Phase 2 preliminary approval, it was noted that the boardwalk and trail to be installed during Phase 2. I'll say with that, we were looking, the Phase 1 for Overland and Phase 2 were two separate applications, as opposed to being where normally a phased plat will be one preliminary plat with a phasing sequence and then built out. The way that this was done, the preliminary approval for Phase 1 and 2 was in May of 2021. So Phase 2 will expire in May of 2023. And as stated by the applicant, there's no current plans of starting construction on Phase 2 at this time. So staff's concern is, how is that walking path and trail going to be completed if the Phase 2, which is called Phase 2, but is an intent, a completely separate development from Phase 1, it could be sold off to new ownership, and then now trying to get back into Phase 1 to start the path to connect through is, really giving staff lots of concern.
So we have 300 feet of a straight mulch path along a ditch. I mean, not to be, that's what's there now. And we envisioned when it was approved this bridge and walk through the woods.
Totally different.
On the screen is a kind of a colored rendering to help. In red is a rough outline of where the Phase 1 boundary lines currently are. You can see the lower left-hand side of the screen, that phase line splits where that bridge is going across the wetlands. It was noted in the preliminary that a no-rise certificate would have to be done going through the floodway and provided to the building department. But now, not knowing if Phase 2 will actually come to fruition before it expires, haven't had a pre-construction meeting, so there's no building permit, so it's still, I don't know what process they are on, but they have stated they don't have any intentions in the immediate future.
Can you point out where that is on that map? I misunderstood that prior to the meeting.
So the walking trail that is installed is this dashed green line on the northern side of the pond. The path that has not been installed is at the very southern end of the pond going through. There's an outfall structure located approximately in this area here. That is the outfall structure for the pond that gets into the wetlands. And this footpath and then this covered bridge, connected bridge that gets into this circular trail has not been installed. And it was discussed.
So are they considering Phase 1 being everything inside that red line, and then
Correct.
Phase 2 comes over and engulfs that loop over here in the wetlands?
Yes. Phase 2 is kind of a U-shaped
Tortuous
piece of
shape.
property, so to speak, capturing the circular roundabout there where the walking trail would be, and then the next development of houses. And that's where we're kind of in a catch-22 of.
In hindsight 2020, I wish we had made the Phase 1 line continue to the east and to the south and engulf all of that.
And it was at one point, at the initial review for case SD 21.22, which was the preliminary for Phase 1, The phasing line was actually where the yellow line is on the right-hand side of your screen. The yellow line was the phase line that showed where that path was going to be. Now, that whole entire path was still partially in Phase 2. Then throughout the case and review, the phase line did move to where the red line currently is, kind of splitting that floodway and going a little bit further south. But the path was never completely inside of Phase 1.
And I think the main concern right now is if it does wind up in another owner's hands, there's no rights to come in for this POA. Because it is a separate preliminary plat for Phase 1 and 2, which is unusual. And I think we need to make sure that the plat has a note that can be done by, it very well maybe at the beginning of the year, the same developer comes in and starts Phase 2. That's completely viable, but if it doesn't happen and lingers for years, we want to ensure that whenever that does come in, that they have rights to get on it.
At minimum, some type of, at least an easement running across this common area that at the time of development for Phase 2 or the next installment of this, it can be required at that review or at the time of construction then and be required to connect. So I think an easement with a note that at the time the adjacent property is developed, it shall connect through here with a walking trail, would not be out of line.
Well, let's, I've got a few more questions. I want to come back to that, but I think Larry, might be good to bring him up for some
Well,
of
let
those
me,
questions.
let me ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
Is that walking trail not an amenity intended for Phase 1 as well as Phase 2?
Yes.
Huh?
It's for both phases.
I'm sorry?
Yes, it is. You
Yes.
are correct. Yes, it is.
Okay. All right.
There is green space in Phase 1 around the pond, the 4.1 acres or 4.4 acres, part of the wetland, part of the retention pond, I think was counted during the preliminary review. And then the walking path in Phase 2 connected to it, giving Phase 2 its total area of required green space.
I would like to say good job. Good job on catching this and bringing it to our attention. I think so many times we think about the other aspects, that the timing of this is something it wouldn't have occurred to me on the way that affects it. So I appreciate.
We've lived it.
Yeah.
On a few projects and.
Well, I'm thinking of Twin Beach Estates and what we approved and what didn't happen, and it's very similar.
Well, we've seen some where, one phase is constructed, and even things like roads, where it's very obvious there's a stub out here. But if that goes 8 years without the second phase happening, those neighbors get so, just to ensure that this is there and platted, and we have, if this goes 5 years and all the homes in Phase 1 are built and someone comes in, that's going to be moving through the green space of Phase 1.
I mean, just the qualitative difference. I drove out here because I remembered that trail through the woods. I was like, oh, cool, I'm going to see this before the meeting. And then saw 300 feet of a straight line mulch trail. It was like, why is this trail even here? What is this doing? I could walk on the side. I could walk on the, like, it's not, it doesn't make any sense to what's there now.
Right.
Any more questions?
One last slide, just some minor edits to the plat. These are some comments that got to them a little late and have not been made on the plat. They may have already been made. Adding the ordinance number, adding a general note for a drainage utility easement, general note for the POA is responsible for the walking trails, labeling the pond and wetlands common area, adding total number of wetland buffer signs, adding a signature block for gas, and removing the signature block for the planning director. Are just some minor edits that probably have already been made. We have not gotten that at this time. Some follow-up activities. Staff will need a copy of the recorded plat if approved. We have a copy of the recorded O&M agreement, and then the maintenance and guarantee agreement will be signed by the mayor. And the plat will expire in 120 days. So staff's recommendation is approval for SD 22.28 Overland Phase 1 subdivision with the following condition is we had it as to install the trail in Phase 1 as shown in the PUD as well as preliminary plat for Phase 1. And I added the condition to complete the minor edits that we just discussed. And staff would also support an easement being placed there if planning commission so desired. So I'll be
I
happy
don't
to
think
answer.
an easement does a darn bit of good. I think installing it does great, but an easement, if you could get the other to bond it, but, I mean, an easement just means that if the city wants to come in at their own cost and do it, they've got the right to do it. I don't think that
It'd be-
would hold the feet to
Well,
the
it
fire.
wouldn't be for the city, because that's private property, not city maintained. That would be there strictly for when the adjacent property,
I
which is right
understand.
now phase
I'm saying
two.
there's a difference between an easement and a contract. I mean, to me, an easement, allows that somebody can do it if they wish, that the people can't say, no, you can't do it.
Right.
But on the other hand, that doesn't necessarily require that they do it.
And I will kind of say this, I think there's no way, I would be shocked if phase two can get built before phase two, or before the expiration. So I would suspect we get.
We'll probably have to extend that one. I mean, it's a nice looking development, and I mean, I don't expect it to go that long. I mean, but who knows, interest rates are, going up by the quarter right now, and if we get into a long, slow period, I mean, I sit there and I look at, Quail Creek and sections of sidewalks still missing in Quail Creek, and what's the springs over there across from the soccer fields. People get upset at us when we require all the sidewalks to be done at first, but then, with that one where we said, well, the sidewalks have to be done within 2 years, and then nobody wants to be the bad guy and go pull a bond, then, you've got, what's that Springs one? I mean, there are two subdivisions that are over 12 years old. I wish the city council, I'm about to get on my soapbox, Art, sorry. But
You get it, Lord.
I wish the city council would pass an ordinance that says if you own a lot that's got sidewalks on either side of it for more than 10 years, that you've got to connect the sidewalks at your own expense for the, speculators that are holding on to their lots. I'd love to see those things be connected. But regardless of that, I mean, we'll listen to what Larry has to say, but I really think that thing ought to be done, and then there's no question to it. And, hopefully phase two will come on quick and they'll have it done anyway and won't have to worry about it then.
Completely agree.
Any more questions for staff? Larry? You're up, our bookend engineer.
All right, first, I guess I need to clear up something. When staff asked us what the plans were for phase two, I didn't really understand why they were asking, and so I hate to ever put a developer in a kind of in a corner. We have fully designed it. We've already bid it out, and the last direction we had, they're waiting for December. They want to see how the initial lot sales go. So that's the time frame. It's already been designed and bid out, and so the intent is to start rolling into construction sometime for probably first of the year. So that answers the first question, but we didn't know why the question was being asked. If we would have, given a better answer other than it's undetermined at this point. And so then the second thing I want to point out is the reason for that configuration change on the parcel lines was we needed to make sure each phase stood alone as far as the zoning ordinance, and so we had to make sure each phase had the green space requirements. So when we did that, if you go back and look at the staff report from when the preliminary plat was approved, we specifically stated which part of the trail was going to be in phase one, and then the boardwalk and the loop was going to be in phase two. And that was because of all these phase line changes and everything that occurred at that point. We're perfectly fine with putting an easement over it to make sure that if we all lived through 2008, hopefully we don't end up back there. I understand the concern. But right now, we've been directed that they're planning on issuing the next phase in December. And so, I think that was the main thing everybody's discussed.
Just another more of a detailed question. I guess it felt so different from what I had envisioned for this landscape plan that it was really striking. But was the retention pond built? I thought is it built in this shape, this irregular shape? It felt like just a linear, straight thing when I was out there. It didn't feel like this wiggly, naturalistic shape.
Are we talking about
I'm on the landscape plan. And the grading plan too shows an irregular interesting shape. That's not what maybe,
Yeah.
I mean,
The detention, I can't speak for the color rendering, but the detention pond was built to the design specifications.
I guess I'm looking at the boundary and lot subdivision, not the grading plan.
That's something that
Grading
this-
plan straighten those lines out. In your, though it's shown, the grading lines are shown on the landscape plan.
So the grading
TP100.
plans, okay, so we missed, okay, I just bring that up because of I appreciate what you're saying about trying to get the right amount of green space in each one, but the green space felt
Yeah.
very different. And that happens sometimes, CAD text, that happens. It's
Well,
harder
that-
to draw wiggly lines.
That and PUD documents get created before a calculation's ever been done on volume and everything else. And so, you know, we try to undulate as much as we can because it looks a lot better than just straight shot ponds.
Well, that's one thing that Hunter's talked about that I'd love you to put your architect mind together with him, is how, we had that big oak tree cut on that other subdivision. We kind of found out later that, a lot of the drawings, are different and don't correspond, and we're just kind of looking at getting those things together, and that's something that we do need to discuss.
And I'm sorry, I would have asked this question before, but we talked early on about this bridge, and it is in a floodway, and has the no-rise process and review started with ADM or anybody?
Yeah, it's been actually, well, they've already left, but Dewberry's done the no-rise for us. I believe they've already submitted it to Eric. And I know the bridge has been bid out. We have a contractor on board. I mean, everything's going. I just, like I said, I didn't know why they were asking the question. I guess I should have asked, why do you want to know this information versus just putting them in a corner.
I mean, if you're planning on building it, seems to me that it shouldn't be any problem putting that path in now.
How do we approve, if we were to approve this as a final plat, and what's the time frame that they would have to have the trail and the bridge and everything else in?
That's kind of the challenge for me trying
Hey,
to.
come ahead a little bit.
That's the challenge that I'm sitting here trying to figure out. I mean, do you hold up building any homes until it's done, or do you say, okay, if we know phase 2 is going to have an extension, before you ask for that extension, it's in? At what point do we if we make that be installed, what point do we?
I think you assume the worst case with what's going on in our economy, and if you want this trail to be built, then we got to figure out a way to tie it to phase 1, but maybe not to the point that we hold them up from being able to start selling lots. Now, Mr. Legal Counsel, tell me how to do that.
Yeah, I raised that question and I don't have an answer for you right here. I mean, we can look at it and discuss it, but.
Wouldn't it be an amendment to your subdivision regulations that certain amenities have to be approved in the first phase?
We can do, and that's something I think
Because you
we're
set up
already
a HOA nightmare when you start that.
I think you're on to something there, and it gets, when there's 9 phases, it kind of gets challenging. This almost doesn't become an issue if this is just one preliminary plat with multiple construction phases.
That's the selling point of a part of a neighborhood, are the amenities, and then you live there for 5 years and you never get to enjoy that pool or that walking trail.
Well, we've had like that
I
one.
just don't, I'm of the opinion, you talk about 2008, but I mean, for those of us that are so old we can't stand it, we remember the 1970s also. I can't quite remember 1929, but the point is that there's no telling what's going to happen now. So if we're in the process here and getting ready to start selling lots, now would be the time to get them to do it. Is there a way that we could maybe? How long? Do you have any idea how long it would take to put that in?
I have no clue how long it would take to
Does
construct.
Truland sell these lots, or do they build the houses?
Truland is building on these.
mean, Chris, will you feel comfortable, we said that since they'd be building, and it'd be a while before the closings, if we put down that the trail has to be built before any houses are sold? That'll probably give them a couple of months.
I was thinking probably by the first of the year, if there was some way to tie it to, okay, get your preliminary plat, not get your final plat, but and then a set time frame within which they got to get the trail built.
Do you have a quote for that work that can be put into a schedule of values?
I can probably get it.
And what about a performance bond? Not our typical, because this is not, a lot of performance bonds would be.
That'd be fine, but then an easement and a performance bond. If we do an easement and a performance bond, then the city could come back and do it any time. We'd have to have both.
Would the performance bond be tied to like a CO?
No.
Because how long's our performance bond time
So
period?
this would be an.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, this would be a little bit different than our standard performance bonds and agreements, because typically we're only going to do those things in public rights of ways when they're public amenities. So it's a little unique there. I wouldn't use our typical agreement. I would base the performance bond, if that's the way we go, on this condition alone. I think we need an agreement for that. Or just
Y'all are throwing a lot. I mean, there's a lot here
this
to
is a lot
unpack.
of-
So I would suggest if you're leaning that way, that you table it and let us come to a solution and come back before you next month. Because there's a lot of great ideas there, but there's legal ramifications, and his client may have some concerns about some of the time those conditions as well. And I think, discussing this makes sense, but to do it right, kind of put me on the spot.
Based on the cost, his client may just say, hey, let's just go do it.
Exactly. And so it may be worthwhile to let this lay over until next
Howard,
meeting.
what is the date of our next meeting?
I believe it's
November
November
the
7th.
Yes,
Um,
so that's more than 30 days.
Do you have a problem requesting that it be, because I think if you request that it be tabled, that would be great. Otherwise, my inclination would be to approve it subject to the thing being built.
So I guess my only other question is this is now a condition that doesn't match what the original conditions of the preliminary plat were, where the staff recommendations clearly stated in the exhibits that were provided, and that clearly stated that the boardwalk and that loop were to be built as part of phase 2. And so that's my only concern here, is we're now taking and making a change to the original approved preliminary plat. And my client.
Wait, go back. You're saying the approval for the preliminary plat specifically stated that the trail was to be built during phase 2?
That's correct. And I sent.
I agree with you then.
Yeah.
Well, the odd thing is, I believe that was stated for the preliminary of phase 2, that the trails would be done, which is completely separate from phase 1. I don't believe phase 1 actually stated that the trails were going to be done in phase 2. The snippet that you'd provided, that I looked at and pulled up, was from the staff report for phase 2. So we're kind of in a quandary. We're moving some of the lot lines now to capture the townhome development because of the minor subdivision that was never recorded. So we're already kind of moving and altering what the phase 1 was and expanding it to capture the corner of the townhomes and capturing it to include phase 2 property of land, which is now lot 2 of what wasn't in the original preliminary already.
Well, and I feel like shame on me for not thinking better when this whole thing was going down, because I lived through '08, and right across the street from the high school, that Battles Village, I mean, that had 3 swimming pools and 16 tennis courts and a workout room, which I still haven't seen built, and that place is finished out. So it's just our issue with this is, what if phase 2 never gets built? Then we don't. Then
That's the
phase
big
1.
question.
Then phase 1 is not what phase 1 is presented to be.
Same builder, but There isn't a second pool in that. Just remember.
No, I mean, it was supposed to be done before. I mean, I'm talking about years and years ago. I think we went through bankruptcy and, 3 times, and so everything just changed. My point being that, it got so divided the first section and, still not a tennis court in there. But I'm just saying that, who knows? I mean, the developer could sell that property tomorrow. And then what if the new developer says, I don't know.
Well, it is a PUD, so if they sold it, they'd be bound by the PUD or they'd be coming back to y'all.
Well, that's true. And I kind of, what Art said, I mean, that's true. If we approved it that way, I mean, we kind of.
Maybe this is a lesson learned for all of us.
I think so.
That when we've got one like that, just be sure to tie whatever amenities there are that are associated with each phase, be sure they're there at the beginning.
Yeah, and we've done that with a lot of the stuff.
That's right.
All right. Anyway, all right, whoever feels comfortable making a motion.
Okay, you want to make a motion?
Go ahead, Larry.
I'm glad I don't sit there, I'm not gonna lie. I've actually told my wife several times, if I ever get asked, tell me no.
So just to clarify, because it's a PUD, whoever buys that second parcel has to build that trail.
Or they have to come in and ask for us to change it.
They're either going to build it or they're going to have to ask for a
Yes.
variance.
As part of the
Change.
ordinance. If it was part of it, then yes.
Okay, so it doesn't solve the timing issue.
The timing issue's still there, but the performance issue.
So before we make a
Correct.
motion, let's just discuss real quick. if we
I
got-
have a question before you do that, just a clarification. So what the original PUD was and what now the revision is, because they made their revision, we can't ask for the revisions that we think should be comparable. Is that right?
What we approved has been revised.
Yes.
And they're
So why
making
can't we
changes,
revise
why
it?
can't we make the changes? That's what I don't understand. If they're making changes to their first,
So the PUD is not a phase, it's an overall plan. So it's there, and we will get the trail and the boardwalk, or they won't get a phase 2. So, I mean, I think it being a PUD, where you certainly have some leverage, what I will say is where you can open up the whole can of worms, is any extension of phase 2. That's a little bit of a challenge, and I think any developer that comes in and wants a preliminary plat for each phase, and doesn't build within that 2 years, creates a potential problem, because they might have to bring up all, that phase to all regulations. That's up to you to determine when those extension requests are given.
So could you stipulate the construction of a walking trail as a condition of approving an extension?
Yes.
Okay.
that's
There
what
you
I
go.
think,
That
that's what
settles
we
it.
need.
Perfect. All right,
Their revision plus our revision.
sounds good.
Now,
That's
I
fair.
believe there should still be an easement placed with a note stating that at
And
the
that's
time of
before
future
we-
development on the adjacent property, that the walking trail will be constructed, just so as if Phase 1 is under different ownership than what Phase 2 is, they still have a right to use that trail. I've seen something similar with a temporary turnaround, that at time of future development, and it's under development right now, that the hammerhead was to be removed and the street connected and installed, so that will occur. That was a development done in 04, 05, that just now is getting connected to a future stub street, but there was a note on the plat that we were able to lean on to make sure that that's connected. and
Because all of it is currently owned by one entity right now.
Currently, right
Yes.
now it is, so they
That
can
would-
put
that
that
would
easement
work.
through there.
So
Okay.
instead of one,
Maybe
if you
ask
say
Larry and see if
the,
that's what his
the
developer would
extension.
want to
It'll
do.
be fine, Bill.
Okay.
but if I recommend, instead of trying to get to every detail of what that easement language looks like, let us work with applicant before we sign the plat and ensure that the goals, if you just, whoever makes a motion, if the motion can read, ensure that there's proper easements for that trail and connection, we'll make sure the details are clarified before we sign the plat. And along with all these other list of minor things, we can sit with that applicant and get that tweaked.
Okay, all right. Who's willing to make a motion?
I think we still need to open the public hearing, don't we?
I'm sorry?
We still need to open the public hearing.
Yes.
Oh, I thought we already had. Lord have mercy, my mind is not here today. In that case, let me go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Would anybody wish to speak from the public? Yes, sir.
Gary Gober, 300 Lincoln Street, Fairhope.
Maybe you just came up here just to prove that I forgot to open the public hearing. I see how you're playing.
This, I just have a sort of a question. Are there any ADA issues associated with this type of trail as an amenity that's to be available to everyone, including?
That answer is no.
No,
It's
this is
private, so they fall under a different standards. If it's in the public right-of-way, the public sidewalks must meet all the ADA requirements. Being a common area, private property, the walking path is at their discretion.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else from the public wish to speak? In that case, I'll close the public hearing at this time. Thank you. Commissioners, anybody wish to make a motion?
You go for it, Rebecca. 2 for 2.
All right. I haven't had my coffee today. I move that we recommend approval of ST 22.28 Everland Phase 1 subdivision final plat with the following conditions. Install the trail in Phase 1 as shown in the PUD. Am I on the right one?
You have to staff recommendation
Yeah.
with the easements.
When I'm adding that, I was going through yours first and then adding ours. Should I leave that one off?
Yeah, I think we were amending that one.
Okay, amend condition 1. There, I thought condition, yeah, hold on. I thought condition 1 was just about that little bitty trail, the little trail.
No, there's more. There's more.
Okay.
You could change condition 1 if you're going to follow Hunter's suggestion, which you don't have to, but you would change condition 1 to create an easement for the
Walking path that
for
is
the
shown
walking
in
path.
Phases 1 and Phase 2.
Created,
Because installation of it before the extension was required.
yeah, I think that's number 2. So number 1 would be to create an easement that will allow the construction of the full walking trail as shown in Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Correct.
And require that the trail be installed as a condition of any possible future extension request to Phase 2. How do I say that?
That's it, you just said it.
Okay. And all staff
Complete the minor edit.
complete the minor edits to the plat with all staff bullet points below. I don't have to read those, do I? Thank you.
Are you comfortable with that, Chris? You look like you're.
Chris got the trigger finger.
You look like you're.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable with all that.
With-
The one
with
point
unicorns
that
and the
he
butterflies.
said was to allow staff to sign the plat after the condition you just stated for the easement is completed to staff's satisfaction.
That makes sense to me. So that's part of the way of what we just said with number 1.
Correct.
We are allowing staff to sign the
Correct.
Stamped plat.
stamped plat.
Okay, so I've got a motion to approve, subject to a right-of-way being put on, to an easement put on where the walking trail would be in Phase 1 and 2, to the satisfaction of the staff and giving the staff the approval to sign off on that, as well as the walking trail to be built prior to any extension of Phase 2, and to complete the minor edits to the plat as per the red listed on the screen. Do I have a second to that?
Second.
All right, we'll give Art the second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes unanimously.
That was a good team motion.
Yes, yeah, teamwork.
And
Free game before we make motions. When they're tricky, let's talk them through. Say Chris and my headaches.
I might have to recuse myself from any talk about Starbucks because the single tax staff would kill me if I ever did anything negative that might slow a Starbucks down from coming to Fairhope. I might be tarred and feathered.
So, and to give everybody kind of an update, y'all saw this, and some of the conversations were kind of, wasn't really about the interior of the Starbucks site, it was the kind of renovations to that existing parking lot, bringing that up, seeing what we can do to beautify.
Killing the trees and.
Doing some amendments to that.
Wait, does this say SC Civil on the bottom of it?
I just would hope that they put some funny green
So,
umbrellas.
When we got to the weed, we finally got a solution, and we're quite literally 2 feet from the finish line, about to take it to city council, got the parking lot in agreement. And then, Larry, you correct me if I'm wrong, corporate Starbucks did away with that layout, the 2 driveway layouts. So this is their preferred plan. And the question that I have for you right now is, because we're in the middle between Planning Commission and City Council, we never took our recommendation. It's a site plan, not a public hearing. None of the infrastructure is really changing. It's all internal to the site of that, and really more about the drive. But the where the building sits is kind of like exact. And I want to let Larry share this. So the question is, do you have comfort level for me taking this plan with all the other accommodations we've made to City Council, or does this need to start over?
Starts over. I don't like the parking in the front. That defeats the whole purpose
That
of.
was what we approved in the previous one.
No, the parking was in the back.
No, there's no layout changes. There's 20-foot buffer provided.
Really? Am I looking, this is 98?
Mm-hmm.
And that
I
was-
thought, what I had looked at, the parking was all back here. Like, and we were talking about it because it was very similar to the Eastern Shore Center, how they have their parking in the back.
They
Like,
had parking exactly where that is.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
So basically, what we did, as Hunter was saying, we surveyed the entire parking lot. We came back with a plan showing several landscape islands. Hunter and the developer got together, and they've got a few more parking islands. So you should have end caps pretty much everywhere except for where there's, I think, 1 or 2 handicap parking spaces. But we were getting the developed plan ready to go to City Council, and as he said, that Starbucks came back and they are doing away with their Y drive-through, which is the dual window ordering system. And so in order to keep the same number of stacking, because that was the major issue between the city and also ALDOT, was to make sure that we kept vehicles out of the other drive aisles and also kept them off of Greeno Road. This is one of the floor plans they have, which shifts that drive-up window all the way around, so we still get the same number of stacking, and if any additional stacking is needed, it occurs within their own parking spaces, not within the right-of-way. So that's really the center block where the building is the same. The courtyard just shifted from the north side of the building. Now it's on the south side of the building. The parking, it is in the same location. We did make it angular to make sure that there's no confusion. Is it a 2-way or a 1-way driveway? That's really the only change on the parking, is we turned it into angled parking because people could think it was a 2-way when we had 90-degree parking. But it's still the same depth dimension, and we still keep the same green space up along Greeno Road.
Does anybody have a picture of the old one, and when y'all do this, if there was any way that we could compare them, that would?
I have a question, Larry. I can't remember, usually I can't remember my name from yesterday, but I agree with Holly. Not necessarily that we didn't approve it that way, but why do we have, in a big old parking lot like this, why do we have parking out by the highway? Why did we agree to that? If you say we agreed to it, I'm not questioning that. I'm just wanting to know why would we have done that with all these other parking places out here identified, and it's one big old giant slab of asphalt. I mean, why, do you
Honestly,
remember?
I don't think the question
You can't
was
remember yesterday either, can you?
We may have been so distracted because that parking lot's so terrible right
tell me if
now.
I'm wrong,
I know
I'm
that
remembering
we were
that-
complaining, like, I think Lee didn't like the construction because it was like modern and we were, or
That
maybe
was
it was art. It was art, talking about, we were talking about more about the construction.
I never seen anything bad about architects. No, I'm remembering that we said, hey, they're giving us 20 feet on top of what, Corridor 98's already done. And I thought that it was kind of a quid pro quo that we said that, hey, y'all can have some of that parking there, but we want you to do some more islands scattered throughout.
We don't
because-
have any requirements of that was the Greeno Road overlay that got thrown out.
Yeah.
That required parking.
But
behind
because
it.
there was
But there
We
was-
don't have any.
because there
we've
was
got
a
buffer.
we were asking them that we didn't really have the right to
Maybe
ask
this
them.
doesn't have all the green trees and
to
all the
do-
stuff I need to see. That's why I need to see the original.
But don't
Anytime
remember-
you bring
Holly,
something.
I'm just trying to remember myself. Weren't we talking about that they were going to give us more islands?
Yes.
And
I
that's
thought
what
that-
we did.
I wanted
That's
outdoor,
what I thought we had.
people could go and work on their laptops and have coffee and spend hours there, not just a drive-through and
Oh,
parking
no,
lot.
the courtyard's still the same size courtyard that y'all approved there. It's
So
actually
that,
larger now.
so that brick, I think we got, personally, I think I got a little distracted because I was so delighted that some of that parking lot would be replaced with anything other than parking lot.
And
But-
that's kind of the
But
the
it's-
delay getting to the, of which exactly.
But I hate that, I realize it's not the overlay, but we have the other example of a building that's pushed towards the street in the corner and doesn't have parking in between the building and the street, and their covered eating area feels really nice. Even for a, fast food restaurant, it has some character because it's closer to the green space.
So we can look, this is the packet from March 2022. The parking is
Okay.
on the Greeno side. You actually had more asphalt because you had 3 drive aisles in the one way. Remember, this is also a separate lot. So where we were able to look at the overall parking lot is that there's overall shared parking for that whole center. So anytime a change happens, that becomes a non-conforming, becomes brought up to code. So we had some leverage to say, all right, beautify the parking, and that's what we've kind of looked at.
But see, south of there, those little angles, what is that?
These?
Yeah.
The-
That's
And that's
still on
still in the
this side.
same plat.
Yeah.
Yeah, still there.
That's still there.
So
So,
Ooh, look at that. Go
so,
ahead.
like, yeah, go back to that. So in this floor plan, the place with the brick hatch, is that's an
the
outdoor courtyard?
Yeah.
So-
It's
so
actually gotten
this is a
bigger with
courtyard
this layout.
connected to that.
And what is just to the
Just
south of
doesn't
that,
look
where it says
nice.
bike
Yeah,
rack?
it's just,
Is
That's
that-
just
But-
I gotta
landscaping.
see.
That's gonna be landscape.
Can you go back to those
That'd be nice.
renderings? So
Okay.
if
okay.
it looks
So here.
somewhat like that.
So will that be in the facing
That's-
98?
That would be facing the
side.
south.
That'll just be on the south side,
That's
Okay.
looking this way.
Okay.
facing all the landscape.
See, this would be landscaped
With-
as well, right there.
Yes, that land,
That would be
there's
landscape.
So
some
that's a
minor
big-
tweaks, and I will say what we looked at before, and it's really particular because there are some trees being actually in the right of way
Just wish
being
that was
removed.
there.
Is screening in that landscape, so if there's any parking, we're gonna look at the landscape plans, and I wanna make sure we convert that. We don't wanna open it up so the sign is very visible. I mean, that's the goal. And everybody's business goal is to remove enough trees so we can see our sign. Well, that's not our goal. So we want to, actually hide the building as much as possible.
Compared to what we have, to me, it's a bit of an improvement.
Yep.
But I think we're setting a precedence. Again, now we're going to have all the restaurants that are going to have everything at the rest of
There's your landscape plans. So
Well, but
So
Holly,
they're
in
not
this, we're
seating in the
requiring
green
20
space?
feet, and remember, this is a separate lot. I mean, we can't get them to do the whole big lots thing.
and you're losing,
Nice if we
those are
could.
90-degree parking spaces, so
No, she's just
guessing
talking
we're
about
actually.
I just
the
wish the
building
parking-
here
Yeah,
and
we've
the
actually
parking
reduced.
there.
just swap,
Just
just flip flop them.
mirror
Put
it.
put the Starbucks where the parking is, put the
Just
parking
turn
where
the
the
building
Starbucks.
upside, that's,
Can you
just
Holly
flip-flop
suggests
it?
turn it upside down, and then you'd have the courtyard facing Greeno, you'd have the landscaping facing Greeno, you'd have more of the parking behind it if you just turned it upside
It
down.
would
I was
look
kind of
amazing.
thinking about that, but I didn't want to suggest it because people might think I was smart.
Say that again?
So
Just turn it upside down.
swap where the Starbucks building is, put it where the parking lot is. Where the parking lot is, put it where the Starbucks
mirror
is.
it.
Just mirror
Just
it.
turn it upside down, that way you've got
And then the road sees the
courtyard.
Starbucks and not the cars.
And
And
then
so
the
you
people
could
from
walk
Reno-
up right
They'll-
into,
They'll actually, Yeah, you'll lose stacking, and then you'll also, you'll see the drive-through. I mean, that's where all the cars really are these days, if you go to any.
You'd see the line of cars
Oh,
parked in
okay.
the stacking.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, the dumpster.
Well, that's true. Not many people park there anymore. They just,
And
Well,
look
you know,
again,
the ones that, I don't go to Starbucks, but the ones that I've seen, the thought that you're gonna have your line of cars coming through right down the middle of where those two angular parking areas are, those poor son of a guns are gonna have a hard time getting out of those places.
no, I think
that's
they
why
meant
we-
mirror the whole
Always cars
plan.
backed up at
Well, they
Starbucks.
got,
Yeah.
it looks like they can handle 14 cars.
that was why we were, 9 is what
14.
Starbucks limits to, but we got 14 cars stacked before you start interfering with existing parking.
And we didn't choose
If you
the
got that many
little,
there, I'm not-
those are
I'm
actually,
critiquing it.
yeah.
Oh, the size of the car.
I measured them just because I figured they're 20-foot cars, so.
Okay.
And
they're-
think about this visually.
triplets.
Think about wing fingers.
Do we
Wing
wanna
fingers
do
didn't
this?
have the 20-foot.
It's gonna be long as
But
it's
just
open, it's
the front
fast. I
right
turned
there,
around, it's
kinda
like
had the trees blocking.
20 feet ahead of me. I
This is
pulled
an
up and said,
additional
really? And then all of a
20
sudden,
feet
I
that they're also providing the planning plans and all of that. So
Yeah.
I think pushing away and giving a heavier landscape buffer, it's not like you're gonna look at the parking lot like you are today.
Yeah, the current edge of pavement line is actually at the right-of-way line, which is that vertical line you see right now. So right now, there is asphalt
This
to
whole
there.
thing.
Yeah.
And so we're finding an additional 20 foot. It's already heavily landscaped, and the only thing we're doing out in the right-of-way is connecting that sidewalk over. So you're gonna get an additional 20 foot of trees and
I
landscaping.
think it's nicer, let's do it.
It's gonna be a lot better than what it looks like right now.
Yep.
So you looking for a motion, or are you just looking for?
It's just
a
a quick.
Unless you're
I
in
don't
roller
wanna do
skating.
it without talking to you.
I am in a roller skate.
Do it. That's good with me.
All right. All right, any other old or new business?
I move we adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second, please. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.